The northern region of Ethiopia, Tigray, has been marred by violence, leaving over 1,000 people dead in the conflict. Now, June saw heavy fighting between Tigrayan and Ethiopian government forces, including Ethiopia's allied forces from the Amhara region and neighboring Eritrea. On the 20th of June, Tigrayan forces captured the regional capital and they took thousands of Ethiopian soldiers as prisoners. Now, the same day, the federal government withdrew from Tigray and declared a unilateral ceasefire not to allow an essential aid. But since late June, Ethiopia authorities have blocked roads into the region and access remains sporadic. Now, for more on this, we're joined by Pan-African scholar at the Tshwane University of Technology, Professor Mammo Muchie. Professor, very good morning to you. We've heard about that ceasefire, and as a result, we saw some forces essentially withdraw from that, but it seems to have done more harm than good.
Yeah, thank you very much for focusing on this very difficult problem. You are right. The federal government made a ceasefire, and the expectation was when the federal government made a ceasefire, the Tigray People's Liberation Front fighters will also do. The main reason the government gave was that this is a season where farmers, because have to farm, and therefore the conflict is not the time to do it. But what we now are hearing is that what the Tigray People's Liberation Front did was use the people not to farm, but to continue to join the war. So what we have is the Tigray People's Liberation Front went to the area called Afar area, in an area in the Wollo, then another area called in Gondar, Wolkait, Agade, all these areas. The reason is because they have a plan. They called to set up what they call the Tigray, the Greater Tigray Republic. They have that idea, and they have put it in their first manifesto. And then of course, as you know, the constitution in Ethiopia is still there. In other words, even though the Tigray People's Liberation Front is not now running the country, everything they left. In other words, the constitution, the regional arrangement, everything is still not changed. So what they created over the last 27 years is still there. So because of that, you have a very difficult situation in the country. You don't know what's going to happen, because it's not just a conflict between Tigray, the Tigray forces and the federal army. What you're seeing is also other areas also are in a difficult situation. For example, in the Oromo area called Weleka, Benishangul, in all these areas also, still a lot of people are being killed. It hasn't stopped. It continues. So what we have is a very not very good situation where conflicts have been changed into a peaceful environment. That hasn't been there. So there's a complicated situation going on.
I mean, this essentially now speaks to food insecurity within the region, and especially, as you mentioned, the fact that the ceasefire, which was supposed to allow for farming, has not, done that in particular. This is essentially, it's already a humanitarian crisis, Professor. We've had some leaders from regions around the Tigray, including Amhara as well, calling for essentially the residents themselves, including the youth, to stand up against all of this violence. I mean, surely that's kind of a very difficult call to make, but I mean, of course, the residents there do have their backs against the wall.
Yeah, I think you put it very well. The two things. One, food security will be a challenge. If people are not farming, then there will be, you're right, a challenge can happen for the people not to have food. And then we had this crisis before, famine and so on. So if we continue to mobilize the people to go to war, rather than farm, what you are creating is a risk disaster is going to happen. The other thing you just raised, a very important one, is a crime against humanity is being committed, because children above, can you imagine, 9-year-old children are given weapons, arms, and to become soldiers. Can you imagine? This is what the Tigray People's Liberation Front leaders are doing. They are doing this. I think they are making a lot of, I'm pretty sure a lot of the Tigrayan mothers must be really crying now, because their children, instead of going to school, and instead of giving them pen and paper and books, you are giving them weapons, pistols, all right? All kinds of, making them soldiers. What is going on? And this is against humanitarian law. Your children are not supposed to be in this situation. Children soldiers must not be made. This is illegal. I think unless people are above the law, the international humanitarian law says above 18, then you are a normal human being. You may be a soldier. But before that, I think it's very, very unethical and immoral, unjust and inhuman to do that. So what we are now having is also not just a mobilization of the farmers in the Tigray area, and instead of making them farm, you make them soldiers. Also the children, instead of sending them to schools, you are also making them soldiers. This is not very good. It's a very dangerous situation that's happening. So I think what I don't understand is why, when they do this, the international, especially the American government and other forces in the West, they keep supporting this kind of terrorist organizations. I don't understand why this is happening. I think what should happen is the African Union. I also appeal to the South African government and all to just simply say this is it's not something they can allow in Africa, because whatever happens in Ethiopia also is the same thing like happening in South Africa. So we should really appeal to all of you to just say this, to stop making children. Really, it's very hurtful, to be honest with you. For me, when I saw that, it's just seeing the pictures and some of the mothers also crying. Just seeing that is just the most disastrous situation we have now. The conflict there is very, very complicated. It has to be addressed, and the only way we can address it is this force that is trying to do this disaster, this war, and not stopping. When the federal government stops a ceasefire, they should have been doing a ceasefire, not continuing war. And I think this is something we should. And they are now asking also, some of the leaders are asking, they want a transitional government. They don't want the current prime minister and others. Although an election was taken place, 38 million people were told voted, and that now some parties have been elected, and still they are still continuing to do the election until September. And they are saying that they don't accept it. They want a transitional government to be formed, and that's what they are now. Also, some of them are saying how. So yeah, it's a very complicated situation, as you rightly put it, and the conflict is continuing. And then I think also they are getting support, external support to continue this war, and that has to be really measures must be taken by Africans, I think, in this from this disaster, to save Ethiopia from the current really unfortunate situation that the country has been forced. This is not a country that should be in this situation, given that, as you know, in our history, this is one of the examples in Africa of being the only African countries that all the colonialists have been trying very hard to divide and destroy, but it survived. And because it's survival, they still, I think, the reason why all this is continuing, it seems, is just because they don't want a country like Ethiopia to continue. I think they will just want to destroy it. I think this is very sad. This is not good. We should all stand up against this injustice. That's my suggestion.
Professor Mammo Muchie, thank you so much for your time this morning. It really isn't a good situation. I mean, more than 2 million people displaced in the Tigrayan region, millions others now having to rely on food aid, and of course with access being sporadic, some don't even know where their next meals are going to come from. So a very difficult situation happening there, but of course we'll keep a close eye on it right here on Newzroom Afrika, channel 405, as it continues to unfold. That was Pan-African scholar from the National Research Fund, Chair in Innovation Studies at the Tshwane University of Technology, as well as a senior researcher at the University of Oxford, Professor Mammo Muchie.